Some people were hurt during the making of this video. Not me, but the people I'm going to be talking about. The video contains some morbid events, but I'm not going to be showing anything graphic. I'm just going to be talking about it, in very deep detail. If you aren't a fan of black comedy or morbid humor, then this video probably isn't for you. I would suggest watching some of my other videos, like the 25 Days of Holiday Cheer series that I'm completing in a very timely fashion. But anyway, here's the video. Have you ever walked down the street and found a penny heads up? If you have, then that's good luck. Have you ever come really close to dying, but didn't? If you have, then that's even better luck. Some individuals have encountered this thing known as a near-death experience. Near-death experiences can result in a few things like hallucinations, out-of-body feelings, seeing the proverbial light, and much more. A lot of people become devoted to a faith because they believe some greater power had a hand in saving them, and for a good reason, too. I mean, if you were close to death, you'd probably sit down for a little while and think about what just happened. If you wound up dying, what would you regret not doing? What would be your last words? Should you have looked at more quote-unquote inspirational Facebook posts and lived your life to the fullest? If you're a little curious where I'm going with this, then this video is just for you. In this video, I'm going to be talking about people who have gotten really lucky out of unlucky situations and had to ask themselves these types of questions. Now, when I talk about near-death experiences, I mean actually really freaking close to dying. Let's take a car mechanic named Bill, for example. He was working during the 1977 South African Grand Prix, a Formula 1 race, and a vehicle caught on fire. He had to cross the track in order to put the vehicle out and make sure the driver was okay. While he was crossing the track, a driver by the name of Hans Joachim Stuck. Oh wait, sorry, he's German, let me try it again. Hans Joachim Stuck was rooming along at a brisk 170 miles per hour. Stuck saw Bill and was able to get out of the way just in the nick of time, missing him by what spectators call millimeters. I think millimeters is close enough to be classified as a near-death experience. I mean, it wasn't feet or anything like that, and Stuck was driving fast enough where if they collided, who could imagine what could have happened? Well, because of what occurred shortly thereafter, we don't really have to imagine what could have happened. Close by our good old friend Bill was another mechanic by the name of Frederik Fricke Janssen van Woerden. If I told you both of those names at the start of the story, and you know that one of them lives, I think you could guess which one probably will make it to the end. The thing about a Formula 1 race is that there are multiple vehicles racing one another on a track. So although Stuck narrowly missed the two mechanics, the driver behind him, Tom Price, couldn't say the same. A good rule of thumb is that when an inanimate object is traveling really fast and hits a human, the human's probably going to lose. Price hit into Fricke going a brisk 170 miles per hour, and Fricke went up in the air from the collision, instantly dead. Price, with a glazed look in his eye, looked up at Fricke, who wasn't as lucky as our good old friend Bill. And you may be asking, why Price had a glazed look in his eye? Well, that's because he's dead too. Another good rule of thumb is that when humans travel at really fast speeds into inanimate objects, the humans also lose that one too. Remember how I mentioned Bill was going to put out a flaming vehicle? Well, Fricke was the one carrying the 40-pound fire extinguisher, and when Tom hit into Fricke, the extinguisher bonked Price in the head, practically decapitating him. And so our good old friend Bill carried on with his life after almost being eviscerated, and Stuck kept racing another day. Now that we have the baseline for how near a near-death experience has to be, let me tell you the story about Roy Sullivan. Roy was a park ranger who started working as a park ranger when he was around 23 or 24. He loved working in the park, it was a great way to make a living, and you get to be in nature all day, which he clearly loved. Except, one fateful day in April 1942, there was a thunderstorm. He ran inside a radio tower to protect himself from being struck by lightning, but unfortunately some dumbass didn't install the lightning rod yet. The tower was being struck repeatedly and there was fire everywhere. Roy fled the burning building and was touched by God. And when I say touched by God, I mean he got reamed with a bolt of lightning. He was left burned with a strip along his leg and a hole in his shoe. He wasn't quite dead, but he was in tremendous pain. I'm just assuming he was in pain, because if over 1 billion volts of electricity travels through you, I'm assuming that you have to be hurting a little bit. Maybe you'll be sore the next day or something. But Roy survived though. The expression does say lightning doesn't strike twice, so Roy thought he was in the clear. I'll ruin the surprise and say that Roy was in fact not in the clear. He kept doing park ranger things like arrange some shit with picnic baskets or something like that, I don't really know. And then 14 years later, on fateful July night, Roy was driving his truck. He was moving along at a brisk speed limit pace when it happened. His truck was not hit by lightning. That wouldn't have been a problem because it would have sort of acted as a barrier for Roy, and he would be okay. Instead, a nearby tree was struck by lightning, deflected off, and into the open window of the truck, striking Roy. I suppose the expression lightning doesn't strike twice doesn't really work if you're in a real-life Final Destination movie. His eyebrows were singed off, his hair on fire, and he was unconscious at the wheel. His truck kept rolling along, approaching a cliff. The truck was getting ever so closely to presumably ending Roy's life. Instead, it rolled to a stop, and Roy managed to live another day. And so that concludes the story of the man who was struck by lightning twice. As a result, he spent some time off and thought about telling his loved ones that he cared about them, and then he got his PhD and became a professor at an institute. Who am I kidding? He stayed as a park ranger. Imagine loving nature so much that after theoretical impossibility, you still want to keep being a park ranger. The odds of getting struck by lightning are very slim, but the odds of getting struck twice and living both times? Roy's an exception and lucky to be alive. Roy had to have appreciated this near-death experience not being a death experience and really took in how great life really is. Let's imagine he was taking this fact in on a day in July in 1970 in his front yard. Well, if you're Roy in this situation, that's bad news bears, because a bolt of lightning struck a power transformer and moved over to his left shoulder. The lightning count is up to 3 times. That's 3 now. He wasn't even working this time, so you can't really blame him. I mean, not that you could blame him for getting struck by lightning in any of these situations, but at least he wasn't like at a ranger station in spring 72 and, oh my god, you're kidding me. Lightning struck him for the 4th time and his hair caught on fire. Roy, shell-shocked and presumably starting to get a little sick of this happening, tried to smother the flames with his jacket to no avail. Then he tried to put his fat head under the tap, but he couldn't fit and he had to use a wet towel to put his hair out. Now, getting struck by lightning once is a little absurd. Twice seems impossible, but 3 times? That's unbelievable. Then in the words of Billy Mays, he threw in the 4th one for free? This is getting out of hand, and Roy would agree. He's starting to get spooked. This wasn't exactly a normal thing to be happening. It's like the angel of death hired an intern and just kept sucking ass and couldn't finish the job. Roy started questioning everything now, and instead of thanking being alive, he was fearing death. Lightning strikes can kill a normal man, but Roy is a genetic freak and he's not normal. If you could take lightning 4 times, I think you're confident you'd survive if it were to happen again. Roy started carrying a bucket of water with him wherever he went in case he caught on fire again. Just picture that weird kid from your school who did that thing and no one could tell you why. Roy is that kid now, but for park rangers. A year later in August, Roy saw a storm cloud. He became paranoid and started driving away. It followed him. Nope, you gotta be kidding me. Surely not again. He kept moving as fast as he can, and eventually, he got away. He could breathe a nice sigh of relief. He got out of his car and was able to be thankful that he wasn't struck for big number 5. At least he thought that for a few seconds before actually getting struck for big number 5. It literally knocked his shoes off, and he dumped his can of water on his head because his hair was on fire yet again. The forces of nature are now batting 0 for 5 on taking out Mr. Sullivan. Roy began the habit of pulling over and laying down in his front seat if there were a thunderstorm. This is becoming ridiculous. I'm still writing this story. You've got to be kidding me. Surely it has to end after the 5th time. It's getting out of hand. Just say that he lived the rest of his life happily and charge-free. No, I can't. I can't. He saw a cloud approaching him 3 years later, started scurrying away, presumably questioning his career decisions, and was struck again for the 6th time, catching on fire yet again. Most people don't have their hair catch on fire in their life, and Roy's had his hair catch on fire multiple times from lightning alone. This story doesn't have a happy ending, just like as a heads up, but there's something really funny about this all. Like, if you hear somebody say, the government's after me, or the apocalypse is coming, you'd think they were crazy and just be thinking, alright man, whatever you say. But Roy's been saying for years, Mother Nature is out to get me, the clouds are following me. And you want to respond the same way, but then he winds up getting bodied by a bolt of lightning, and you're left standing there, starting to connect red lines on a corkboard, trying to get to the bottom of this whole nature conspiracy. It's hilarious, but also terribly sad. He was swimming in a freshwater pool a little over a year later when he was hit by lightning on top of his head, again. Make that 7. Lucky number 7. If he caught on fire, he could just crouch down and put it out because he was in fresh water. When he got out of the water, he saw a bear eating the fish off of his fishing line. This guy's just not having a very lucky life. He ran over and hit the bear with a stick to basically shoo it away from him. This proved successful, and according to stories, he claimed this was the 22nd time he had to hit a bear with a stick. So not only did this dude get railed by lightning on 7 different occasions, he's had to interact with 22 wild bears. Either it's 22 different wild bears, or a single agitated bear, who's likely being bullied by his bear buddies because he was scared of a dude with a stick. Why would you keep working as a park ranger after all these freak occurrences? Even if it were your dream job, having a combined 7 billion volts of electricity run through you, and the fear of being mauled by wild animals, that shouldn't be able to balance the scale where you're okay with that way of life. Mother Nature's 0 for 7, and the intern to death has most likely been let go at this point. If the forces of nature can't put Roy down, then what on earth could? Well, step aside, forces of nature, because here comes the forces of love. After enough strikes to be concerned, Roy had trouble finding people to get close to him, emotionally and literally. He recalled an instance where he was chatting with the chief park ranger, and when they heard lightning in the distance, the chief ranger told Roy, I'll see you later. His wife, who was 30 years younger than him, so let that sink in, 30 years younger than him. When he was 30, his wife was being born. So there's a big age difference. Anyway, his wife didn't love him back and really didn't care about his designs for a YOLO tramp stamp. On one fateful morning in September 1983, Roy decided to take his own life and shot himself in the head. Alleged stories state that his wife didn't realize until several hours later that her husband had died. So let this story of Roy Sullivan be a lesson to you. First, don't marry someone because they are good enough. Marry someone who is just about perfect for you and probably not 30 years younger than you. Second, be a park ranger only if you really, really like nature. And finally, one near-death experience can make you change who you are, while 29 plus near-death experiences can make you paranoid and stubborn in your ways. With those 3 lessons from Roy Sullivan, I think we could all live great lives and enjoy our near-death experiences to the fullest. Someone who truly took his lessons to heart is a man by the name of Frayne Shalak. I mean, he's Balkan. That's all I got, man. Although Frayne married 5 times, he at least knew when to move on and try again. Frayne also learned that if on your first flight, if it crashes and you only survive because you were launched out of the plane and into a haystack, you should probably stop flying. This happened to Mr. Shalak in 1963, and he came out alright. And by alright, I mean not dead. But hey, not dead means good enough for this video. And he realized he shouldn't be flying anymore, so he'll probably be taking trains from now on. Oh, wait, it says here that the year before he was on a train that got derailed and went into a river. Everyone else on the train died except for Frayne, who managed to be pulled out with a broken arm and hypothermia. Well, alright, well if you can't take trains or planes, then those things are death traps anyway. Let's take a bus maybe, that would be better for him. Yeah, buses would definitely be better. 3 years later, after thinking public transport was a good idea, a bus he was riding slid off the road and into a river. 4 other passengers drowned, but Frayne managed to swim to safety. So, okay, Frayne, let's just think about this. You've made it this far in the arm wrestling match of the forces that be, are really having an intense back and forth whether you should die or not. What should be your next approach to living a safe and otherwise forgettable life? How about buying a car? Yeah, a car is definitely the way to go. You only have to rely on how good of a driver you are, and you really shouldn't have to depend on someone else being a goose. And so, Frayne continued his life as he normally did by driving around, and then, oh my god, the car is on fire. Frayne is thinking, you've gotta be kidding me. Frayne made like a tree and got the fuck out of there, and when he was a safe enough distance away, his car's fuel tank was lit and the car exploded. Well, okay, there's probably something wrong with that car in particular. Let's get a new make and model, preferably one with less fire. Frayne went to a used car dealer, dealt with a skeezy guy who promised this bad boy won't spontaneously combust, shook hands and went along his merry way. 3 years later, the used car dealer proved to be just as skeezy as any other car salesman. Hot oil from a malfunctioning pipe fell into the car's engine, and as a result, fire shot through the air vents right into Frayne's face. Frayne got out of the car with all his hair singed off, but he was otherwise alright, just presumably rattled. Maybe cars aren't his forte. Maybe there's some mechanical engineer out there who's just been transferred department to department and keeps fucking up from department to department in trains, planes, and automobiles. Frayne may have thought the same thing and started walking places because who could trust vehicles anyway? You get good exercise from walking and it's free too. Wait, isn't there something dangerous about walking though? I feel like there might be, I just can't remember right now. Walking was going really well until he spontaneously combusted, and I'm just kidding, he didn't spontaneously combust. That can't happen. That would be really silly and improbable. Instead, Frayne just got into a tussle with public transport again when he was hit by a bus. See, I knew there was some sort of danger that came to walking, I just forgot what it was. It's that classic rule of thumb of fast inanimate objects hitting humans, except Frayne didn't die because, as you can see, he's quite the anomaly. He lived another day and bought a good car this time. I doubt he skimped out because there's been no word of it catching fire. 1 year later, he was driving along a mountain curve and avoided a truck, swerved and hit into a guardrail. The guardrail gave way and the car was going off a 300-foot gorge. Frayne was fucked. Worst of all, he wasn't wearing a seatbelt. How do you not wear a seatbelt, man? Come on. After all these years of almost dying, and you don't even take the necessary precautions to drive? Well, lucky for him, not wearing a seatbelt saved his life. He was launched from the car and managed to hang onto a tree and watch his year-old car fall into the gorge where he would have died. I don't want this to be a commercial for not wearing a seatbelt because this was a freak accident. I mean, most of Frayne's life has been surrounded by freak accidents. He's lucky to be alive after all these brushes with death and all these women he's married. Wait, if he's so lucky to be alive, maybe that means he could really get lucky. What's the luckiest thing you could voluntarily do? The lottery. Frayne bought a ticket and he won the equivalent of $1.1 million US. What I don't like about this story is that we never would have heard about it if he didn't win. Like, picture me telling you all these crazy stories and then I say, and after all this, he never even won the lottery. What a bitch. Anyway, with this money, he balled out and bought 2 houses and a boat, and then he realized it just didn't feel right. All this stuff after all he's been through, you should be glad to be alive and be able to spend his time with his friends and family. He realized this, gave away the rest of his winnings to his loved ones, and lived a frugal lifestyle from there on out. Good for you, Frayne, you're doing life right. And by doing life right, I mean actually living. We've seen near-death experiences on both ends of the spectrum. Someone who didn't let them affect him and he grew to hate life, or someone who learned from them and decided to surround himself with people he cared about. What about someone in the middle, like someone who doesn't let the experience affect them at all and doesn't hate life afterwards? Introducing, why do I have to pick another Balkan name to mess up? Vesna Vulovic. Vesna was a girl who originally traveled to London to learn English, where she discovered her passion for traveling. She wanted to travel the world as much as she possibly could, so she became a flight attendant. A valid career and life path because you get to be paid to travel internationally, but if you find yourself in a video about near-death experiences, you chose the wrong profession. On January 26, 1972, only 8 months after her flight attendant career took place, the plane exploded from a suitcase bomb. She was pinned to the back of the plane by a food cart and landed 33,000 feet below in a wooded area. To put it plainly, most of her body was broken. She should have been dead. She should have, but she wasn't. She was found by a man who was a former war medic who managed to keep her alive until she got back to the hospital. She entered a coma for several days. When she got her senses back, she was confused. When I mentioned her body being broken, her brain hemorrhaged and she had amnesia from an hour before departing to about a month after the crash. One moment she was greeting passengers, then there was nothing, and then she was in the hospital. Now all of a sudden people are asking her these questions about how she attained the world record for the longest fall without a parachute and surviving. She attributed her training, if you want to call it that, to a diet of spinach and chocolate, to both surviving the fall and being able to continue walking after her recovery. She continued her habit of smoking when she came to, because it didn't feel like she went through something terrible. She had a near-death experience, but she didn't remember it, so she just carried on with her life like she normally did. She kept traveling the world and had no problems with going back on planes because she didn't remember it. The biggest issue she faced was a lot of people approaching her and kept saying, "You're lucky to be alive," which they weren't wrong, just she had no idea how to respond to it because she doesn't remember it. She just felt like shit all the time because people are saying she should be dead, but to her it just seemed like she blacked out for a bit and woke up partially paralyzed. She continued to live her dream and kept traveling until her death at 66 years old. Alright, so Vesna didn't change much about her life. Maybe someone else who had a bad experience with her job would quit and do something else. Enter Violet Jessup. Violet was a stewardess on the ship Olympic. The ship was leaving port when it hit into a warship and almost sank, but no one was hurt in the collision. Okay, well that's just an accident, surely it couldn't happen again. Violet was on board a large cruise liner as a stewardess again, doing her thing and all was going well. That is until the ship collided with an object in the water. Panic ensued. People were running everywhere, crying as the Titanic was sinking. Violet was giving a baby. Not her baby, just someone thought, yeah, that bitch could take care of her baby, no question. So she had to make sure people didn't die, and she had to funnel folks into lifeboats and shit, all the while holding this baby who someone just gave her. She was able to get into a lifeboat until her and other passengers were rescued by the ship Carpathia. While aboard the Carpathia, someone swung by and took the baby from her. I mean, I think we could assume it was the mother, but it could have just been someone who thought, that bitch can't take care of her baby, no question. Violet survived the Titanic, which is pretty crazy. Now she could start a new career being a stewardess on the Titanic sister ship Britannic. The lesser-known sister ship of the Titanic is lesser known because only 30 of the 1,000-plus passengers died when it sank. Violet suffered a head injury while getting off the ship, but at least she survived. So after being on 2 sinking ships and surviving both of them, and then on another ship where it got hit, I think you know that she went on to become a stewardess for cruise liners. No more ships sunk while she was on them, which in hindsight makes sense because ships don't sink that often. But if you saw a lot of chaos and people die while in cruise ships, I think you'd probably stick to land after that. She kept sailing along for the rest of her life. Oh, by the way, that baby she saved, one day she got a phone call asking her, "Hey, did you save a baby on the Titanic?" And after answering yes, the voice responded, "I was that baby." The voice laughed and then it hung up. Turns out, that bitch can take care of a baby. If you died at some point in time, then how are you watching this video? Let's try it again. If you almost died at some point in time, then I'm terribly sorry for you. It has to be terrifying to know that your tomorrow almost never came to fruition because of some sort of accident. Life must go on though, even though yours almost didn't. So take the time to reflect on what happened. Think about if you want to change things or treat the experience as forgettable. Start traveling the world, assuming your plane won't crash. Enjoy the outdoors, assuming you're covered in rubber and carrying a can of water. Go on a cruise, assuming it won't crash and sink. And in the end, try to see the good in the times of bad. Unless the good you're looking at is 30 years younger than you. Thanks for watching. If you like this video, send it to a friend. They might like it too.